So there's this TikTok video that I was shown, and somebody asked my thoughts on it, and I gave them something really brief, but I want to dig into it today. So let's go ahead and start the video.
Did you know that there are secret teachings of Jesus Christ that they don't want you to know about? Now, if you've never heard of this, you're not alone, so don't worry. It's called the Gospel of Thomas, and it's packed with 114 sayings of Jesus Christ that they decided to remove from the Bible.
Okay, so he's talking about the Gospel of Thomas. Most people will say that the Gospel of Thomas is actually a later dating than the original Gospels. That the Gospel of Thomas was written in the 2nd century when Thomas would have died in the 1st century. I don't see how an eyewitness could be living in the 2nd century quoting Jesus, as you'll see here in a second. Also, it's not so secret if we have the documents.
Now, I'm going to make a whole series on all 114 sayings, so sit tight. However, in this video, I'm going to give you a brief introduction to what it is, what happened, and kind of like a little general overview of it. And this will kind of set the stage for all of the sayings, and you'll be like, Mike, that makes sense. So the first thing to note is that it's called the Gospel of Thomas. And now, like all the other Gospels in the Bible, it's very unlikely that the person who actually wrote this was named Thomas.
Okay, so I don't know if he's trying to get at that we don't know who wrote the 4 Gospels. I'm not going to assume anything he didn't claim. But we're pretty sure who wrote the Gospels. I mean, we have early church historians to say who wrote Matthew, who wrote Mark, who wrote Luke, and also who wrote John. And we have great evidence to assume that they're the ones that actually wrote it. But even if we didn't know who wrote the Gospels, that doesn't mean it's not true. If what is contained in it is historically accurate, then we have every reason to believe that what it says is true. This wasn't even challenged until about 300-400 years later. For example, Plutarch was somebody who never mentioned that he wrote the biographies that he wrote, and he wrote about 50. But nobody's guessing that he might not have been the one to write it. Everything given to us is attributing what he wrote. Same thing with all the other ancient writers that wrote and never mentioned their own names on the biographies. I mean, you even have Augustine talking to Festus in a debate, and he's saying those books, again, from a comparison with which the productions of questionable origin were rejected, are with certainty attributed to Hippocrates, and anyone who denies their authorship is answered only by ridicule, simply because there is a succession of testimonies to the books from the time of Hippocrates to the present day, which makes it unreasonable either now or hereafter to have any doubt on this subject. How do we know the authorship of the works of Plato, Aristotle, Cicero, Varro, and other similar writers, but by the unbroken chain of evidence? So also, with the numerous commentaries on the ecclesiastical books which have no canonical authority, and yet show a desire of usefulness and a spirit of inquiry. So pretty much he's saying that we act like this towards the Bible, but we don't act like this with any other work in the secular world.
In fact, the word Thomas, the name Thomas actually means twin. And this text portrays Thomas as the twin of Jesus. And the point is that anyone who had these texts, these words, became spiritually identical to Jesus himself.
Okay, he uses the claim that Thomas is spiritually the twin of Jesus, which the Bible never really gives us a reason to think that. Yes, his name means twin. Maybe he looked like Jesus. Maybe he looked like Matthew. And why Matthew? Well, every time you read the Gospels, you see the disciples listed. And every time you see Thomas's name, he's always next to Matthew. So he might have had a connection with Matthew in that sense that he was close to him. Maybe he just looked similar. Maybe he had a twin himself. There's no evidence to give support to that, but it's possible. Might be not likely, but that's also a reason why he might be called twin.
And now the reason that this isn't in today's Bible is because in 325 AD, Emperor Constantine actually went through and took out a bunch of information from the Bible and edited it because they weren't happy with the idea that other people would have this information of becoming like Jesus.
He makes another claim talking about Constantine taking out parts of the Bible in 325. But if you go look into history, the council that Constantine held, he never did anything with the Bible, yet it had to do with the deity of Christ. Because you had Arius of Alexandria saying that Jesus was created. So they wanted to settle the matter, and he called for 1,800 bishops to show up. Only 318 showed up. And one historian actually tells us that it looked like an army of martyrs because of all the persecution that just had happened. And even non-Christians that are honest, that look into history, will even say that Constantine had nothing to do with the books of the Bible. The stamp of approval of the New Testament was at the end of the 4th century, and this council was held at the beginning of the 4th century. So I don't see how he could take something out if it was never put together in the first place.
And it is now known today that over 45 books of the Bible were taken out and removed because of this line of thinking. So now you might be wondering is how do we know of the Gospel of Thomas if all this was taken out?
45 books were removed. I don't see how they could be removed if they were never put in the first place. And what are those 45 books? I've looked around and I cannot find them. And if they're some of the apocryphal books, we have good reasons to reject them because they do not line up with what we were given, with what the prophets and the apostles have taught us. The same thing goes for the Gospel of Thomas. It doesn't line up with Scripture, and it has another mindset. And if you want to look more into the Gospel of Thomas, there's a guy named Inspiring Philosophy that gives a good detailed description on the Gospel of Thomas, so you can check that out for yourself.
Well, in 1945, a group of archaeologists in Egypt actually found 13 leather-bound books that basically stated the Gospel of Thomas.
They did find 13 leather-bound books. They weren't all the Gospel of Thomas. Thomas was in there, but just because you find it doesn't make it legit. We have to put it to the test. We have to criticize it. We have to see if it lines up with anything.
And what's so fascinating about the Gospel of Thomas is these are actually direct quotes attributed to Jesus. If you look at any other books in the Bible, there aren't many times at all where Jesus is directly quoted. It is usually an interpretation of what he said from his Gospels or his disciples.
So he's saying that the Gospels are just interpretations of what Jesus said, but Thomas is direct quotes. I don't see how you can come to that conclusion. How do you know it's an interpretation? How do you know the Gospel of Thomas are direct quotes? I mean, the ones who wrote the 4 Gospels were eyewitnesses or knew an eyewitness. Thomas was written later, so why would you trust that?
So with that being said, the 114 quotes are literally just that. They're quotes from Jesus. And actually in this video, I'm going to give you the very first one because it's like the ultimate cliffhanger in the entire world. And so Jesus must have been the best, YouTuber/TikToker of all time back in the day. So without further delay, let's get into the manuscript. I'm going to give you the first quote here, and remember I'm going to release more as we go along, so, do the thing. Here. So in the spirit of starting off strong, Gospel of Thomas 1, and Jesus said, "Whoever finds out what these sayings mean will not taste death." I mean, seriously, is that not the best hook of all time? Is that what we're all not doing here on Twitter, whatever, is to create hooks? But I've been reading through it, and the dude delivers, so buckle up.
So he quotes the first quote in the Gospel of Thomas, which pretty much seems like what it says in John 8. And in verse 52, it says, "The Jews said to him, 'And now we know that you have a demon. Abraham died as did the prophets, yet you say, if anyone keeps my word, he will never taste death.'" And in that chapter, he makes a claim. He says, "Before Abraham was, I am," which is a deity claim, which he's saying, "I'm God," which is what the Council of Nicaea was in 325, to say that he was not made. And if you read the creed, it has nothing to do with the books in the Bible. But if you read that chapter in John 8, which whoever wrote the Gospel of Thomas has probably already read that gospel, which is why he went to go on to say that they're secret sayings, because he knows that it doesn't have to do anything with the Gospels here. But in verse 48 in chapter 8, it says, the Jews answered him, are we not right in saying that you are Samaritan and have a demon? Jesus answered, I do not have a demon, but I honor my Father, and you dishonor me. Yet I do not seek my own glory. There is one who seeks it, and he is the judge. Truly, truly, I say to you, if anyone keeps my word, he will never see death. And they go on to quote him again to say, how can you say, if anyone keeps my word, he will never taste death? So you have the Gospel of Thomas pretty much quoting the Bible or using it as a source of authority. And now pretty much the rest of those sayings that guy's going to go ahead and continue. The legs already fell at the introduction, so there's no reason to believe the rest of what he says.